I bolted awake at 5 a.m. to the thunder of heavy machinery rattling my house, discovering my insane HOA president had dug a huge trench around my entire property overnight, caging me in like a convict. Picture this, a vicious 6-foot deep ditch encircling everything, heaped with sloppy Georgia red clay. I couldn't access my mailbox, car, or even leave for work without clawing over those filthy mounds like an escapee from hell. They snuck in at night, diesel smoke stinging the air, shovels grinding like screams, excavator snarling as if digging my grave. Patricia Thornfield aimed to scare me out of my grandma's inherited home. She gambled that a broke, divorced electrician couldn't challenge her HOA tyranny. What would you do if trapped in your own yard by a power-crazed neighbor? Hit like, comment your revenge fantasies, and say where you're watching from, 'cause this saga's about to demolish her empire. The fatal flaw. My secret 4K cameras caught every criminal dig, primed to nail her in court. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up trapped in my own home by a psychotic real estate agent with a god complex. My name's Marcus, I'm 45, and I'm an electrician who lost everything in a brutal divorce except my grandmother's little ranch house in Willowbrook Estates, Georgia. This place was my lifeline. Some 200 square feet on 3/4 of an acre that sweet grandma left me when cancer took her 2 years ago. The house needed serious work, but it was mortgage-free and surrounded by $500,000 McMansions. Weekend mornings, the smell of sawdust and motor oil from my restoration projects mixed with wild honeysuckle growing along the back fence reminded me of visiting grandma as a kid, back when life made sense. I was living paycheck to paycheck, using every spare hour to slowly bring the place up to standards. Nothing fancy, just trying to honor grandma's memory while keeping a roof over my head. The stress of starting over at 45 had me waking up at 4 a.m. most nights, but this house was my anchor. Then I met my neighbor from hell. Patricia Thornfield is a 52-year-old real estate agent who treats Willowbrook Estates like her personal fiefdom. She lives in an $800,000 colonial across the street with landscaping so artificially perfect it looks like a funeral home display. Her BMW sports real TR1 vanity plates because subtlety died along with her conscience somewhere around 2008. See, Patricia nearly lost everything in the housing crash. Bankruptcy papers, foreclosure threats, the whole nightmare. That experience twisted her into something obsessed with property values and maintaining standards. She clawed her way back to wealth and now sees any sign of decline as a personal attack on her empire. As HOA president for 8 years, she's built a power network that would make a mob boss jealous. Husband David runs the most connected law firm in town. Brother-in-law sits on city council. She controls 3 HOA boards and has dirt on half the city planning department. The war started with a violation notice slapped on my door like a parking ticket from hell. Commercial vehicle violation, lowering neighborhood aesthetics. My crime? Parking my Ford F-150 work truck in my own driveway. Look, I'm not the type to cause trouble, but this was insane. So I researched the HOA bylaws like any reasonable person would. Right there in black and white, work vehicles under 10,000 pounds explicitly allowed. My truck weighs 6,800 pounds. Case closed, right? Dead wrong. I politely brought this up at the next board meeting, printed bylaws in hand. The community center reeked of stale coffee and Patricia's suffocating Chanel perfume as I stood to address the board. You could have heard a pin drop as I quoted the exact bylaw language. Perhaps, Patricia said, her voice dripping venom. You don't understand what it takes to maintain property values in a quality neighborhood. The way she said quality while staring at my work boots, that's when I saw the real Patricia. This wasn't about trucks or bylaws. This was about a classist bitch who couldn't stomach a working-class electrician contaminating her precious bubble. Her manicured nails drummed the table like a death march as other board members shifted uncomfortably. The humiliation in her eyes was palpable. A divorced tradesman had just schooled the queen bee in front of her subjects. 2 days later, city code enforcement knocked on my door. Same bogus complaint, different letterhead. Patricia had filed a false report claiming multiple neighbor complaints despite the clear bylaw language. That night, I noticed the same car making slow passes by my house. Neighbors who used to wave started avoiding eye contact. My mail arrived, damaged or late. The psychological warfare had begun. The weekly violation notices followed like clockwork. Grass measured with rulers, microscopic paint scuffs. My restoration project under a tarp became an abandoned vehicle. Each $150 fine came with $500 appeal fees, financial quicksand designed to drown me. But Patricia made one critical mistake. She assumed a broke electrician couldn't fight back against her machine. Time to prove her wrong. Patricia's systematic destruction of my life kicked into overdrive after that board meeting humiliation. The violation notices arrived like clockwork every Tuesday. Grass measured with an actual ruler at exactly 0.6 inches too high, microscopic paint scuffs that needed a magnifying glass to detect. My restoration Camaro under a tarp suddenly reclassified as an abandoned vehicle eyesore. Each bogus citation carried a $150 fine plus $500 appeal fees if I dared contest them. The math was brutal, designed to financially strangle a working man faster than a payday loan addiction. The metallic clang of my mailbox became weekly torture as another legal extortion letter arrived, and I started getting that sick feeling in my stomach every Tuesday morning. But Patricia wasn't satisfied bleeding me dry one violation at a time. She escalated to full social warfare, organizing emergency neighborhood meetings about declining property values without bothering to notify the guy supposedly causing the decline. I only discovered these secret tribunals when Mrs. Naomi's teenage son felt guilty enough to tell me. "They were talking about your house, Mr. Marcus," he whispered, looking genuinely sorry. "She had charts and everything." The smell of betrayal is harder to stomach than week-old garbage in Georgia heat. Meanwhile, anonymous complaints started flooding the state electrical board, questioning my license and work quality. Professional sabotage disguised as concerned citizen reports. The timing was so obvious, it might as well have had Patricia's signature on it. That's when desperation forced me to become my own lawyer. I spent sleepless nights researching housing law, discovering something that made my electrician's heart skip a beat. Georgia's Fair Housing Act specifically prohibits selective enforcement of HOA rules based on economic status. The federal penalties could reach $100,000, and suddenly I realized Patricia might have handed me a nuclear weapon. I spent the next 3 weeks documenting every property in Willowbrook Estates like a forensic investigator, measuring fence heights with my contractor's tape, photographing paint conditions, cataloging vehicles that somehow escaped Patricia's eagle eye when they belonged to the right people. The results were devastating. Mrs. Patterson's $900,000 mansion had grass twice the legal height Patricia enforced on my property. The Johnson's fence exceeded HOA limits by 6 inches. Mr. Bradley had been parking a commercial landscaping trailer in his driveway for 2 years without a single citation. But here's where Patricia's arrogance became her downfall. She got so confident in her campaign of terror that she decided to involve law enforcement. One evening, while I was replacing some outlet covers, perfectly legal repair work during normal hours, she called the police claiming I was creating unbearable noise disturbances. What Patricia didn't know was that her midnight property line inspections had spooked me into installing security cameras. Professional-grade equipment with night vision and audio recording, all perfectly legal on my own property. The footage was absolutely beautiful. Crystal clear video of Patricia coaching my neighbor Mrs. Stevens on exactly what to tell the responding officer about construction noise that had supposedly been going on for hours. The timestamp proved my power tools had been silent for over an hour when the complaint was filed. I had caught the HOA president red-handed orchestrating false police reports. Armed with this evidence goldmine, I requested emergency time at the next board meeting. The look on Patricia's face when I walked into that community center carrying evidence boxes was worth every sleepless night, pure panic masked by expensive foundation. "I'd like to address some concerns about enforcement consistency," I announced, connecting my laptop to the projector with the confidence of a man holding 4 aces. The next 20 minutes were absolutely glorious. Photo after photo showing violations ignored on million-dollar properties, audio playback of Patricia's false complaint coaching session, statistical analysis proving my citations were 400% higher than any other homeowner despite having fewer actual violations. Patricia tried desperate procedural objections, but the damage was nuclear. Board members were shifting like kids caught cheating, and I could smell her desperation mixing with that expensive Chanel perfume like cheap wine at a country club dinner. "This appears to be targeted harassment based on economic discrimination," I concluded, letting the legal implications hang in the air like storm clouds. The community center went dead silent except for fluorescent light buzzing and Patricia's increasingly heavy breathing. You could practically hear her mental calculator working overtime on damage control scenarios. As the meeting ended, Patricia intercepted me near the exit. Her voice dropped to a whisper that sounded like grinding metal. Some people just don't understand what it takes to maintain community standards in a quality neighborhood, Marcus. The threat was crystal clear. This war was just beginning. Walking to my truck, I noticed 3 board members huddled in intense conversation, throwing nervous glances toward Patricia's BMW. The cracks in her empire were starting to show, and she knew it. That night, I upgraded my security system and added cloud storage backup. Something told me Patricia Thornfield was about to show me exactly how far a cornered real estate queen would go to protect her kingdom. Patricia's retaliation hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. 3 days after my evidence presentation humiliated her, I came home from a 12-hour electrical job to find my house darker than a tomb. Someone had killed my main breaker during the worst heat wave Georgia had seen in decades. The timing was surgical precision. I'd been installing a commercial panel across town, unreachable for 8 hours straight. My refrigerator had been bleeding lukewarm water across the kitchen floor for hours, spoiling $200 worth of groceries I couldn't afford to replace. My business laptop containing every client file and invoice had been plugged into a surge protector that was now flashing error codes like a slot machine paying out bankruptcy. I stood in my sweltering kitchen, sweat already soaking through my work shirt, and realized Patricia had just escalated from legal harassment to outright sabotage of my livelihood. The police were sympathetic but useless. Could have been kids messing around, Officer Martinez suggested, though we both knew teenagers don't typically target electrical panels with the precision of a master electrician. Without footage of the actual breaker box, there wasn't much they could do except file a report that would gather dust. That's when the psychological warfare went next level. My mail started arriving like it had been through a blender. Torn envelopes, water-damaged contents, or simply vanishing into the bureaucratic void. My bathroom renovation permit, a routine 2-week approval, got buried under additional review requirements that multiplied like cancer cells. 6 weeks of delays while my half-finished bathroom mocked me with exposed plumbing and no working shower. The stress was devouring me from the inside. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart hammering, that metallic taste of pure anxiety coating my mouth like I'd been chewing copper wire. Every sound outside sent adrenaline shooting through my system. Was that footsteps? Another car driving too slowly? Then Patricia decided to attack the one thing that kept me employed. I discovered my work truck sitting on 4 slashed tires like a wounded animal. Not punctured, completely shredded with what looked like a box cutter wielded by someone with serious rage issues. $800 I didn't have for new tires, plus the humiliation of explaining to clients why I couldn't make scheduled appointments. A week later, my gas tank got sugared. Old wives' tale that doesn't actually destroy engines, but does require expensive fuel system cleaning and sends a crystal clear message. Your ability to make a living isn't safe anywhere. I was staring down financial ruin, but desperation makes you creative. I remembered something from my housing law research, Georgia's Open Records Act. For the cost of a decent dinner, any citizen could request copies of government communications. I'd been thinking like a victim instead of an electrician troubleshooting a complex system. Time to trace every wire back to the power source. The email cache I received 2 weeks later was pure gold. Patricia had been running a shadow campaign through City Hall, using her political connections to weaponize bureaucracy against me. Her correspondence with the planning department read like a masterclass in discrimination, discussing undesirable elements and protecting neighborhood character in language that screamed federal lawsuit. One email made my hands shake with fury. We need to make the Collins situation uncomfortable enough that he relocates to a more appropriate community for his income level. She'd put her bigotry in writing on government servers. I had her dead to rights on civil rights violations that carried automatic attorney fees and federal penalties. But Patricia wasn't done demonstrating her desperation. The black sedan started appearing like a bad omen. Slow passes at odd hours, driver in sunglasses and baseball cap making sure I knew I was being watched. Professional intimidation disguised as neighborhood security, the kind that makes your skin crawl even when you know you're safe. My security cameras captured everything, including the license plate that led me down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting. The vehicle belonged to Thornfield Security Consulting, a company that materialized 6 months ago with no website, no business license, and a registration address matching Patricia's brother-in-law's home. She was paying family members to stalk me with HOA money. This revelation hit me like touching a live wire. Patricia wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor. She was running an organized criminal enterprise using community funds to finance personal vendettas. I cornered Tom Williams, the HOA treasurer, in the grocery store frozen foods aisle. His face went chalk white when I mentioned the security consulting payments. "I can't. She'll destroy me like she's destroying you," he whispered, glancing around like Patricia might materialize between the ice cream and frozen pizzas. "Tom, she's already destroying both of us. Help me stop this before someone gets seriously hurt." That conversation changed everything. Tom revealed Patricia had been treating HOA funds like her personal piggy bank, violation fines paying for her landscaping, legal fees, even the harassment security detail. Over $40,000 embezzled across 3 years. I now had federal civil rights violations, mail fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. But Patricia was about to hand me the perfect smoking gun that would end her reign forever. Patricia's desperation reached full psychotic break after I exposed her embezzlement network. Her husband's law firm launched legal warfare designed to crush my soul. A cease and desist letter threatening a $50,000 defamation lawsuit for my malicious campaign of harassment and stalking. The irony burned hotter than a short-circuited breaker. David Thornfield's letterhead screamed old money intimidation, embossed gold on paper stock heavier than my work boots. The accusations were pure projection, stalking behavior, unauthorized photography of private property, and deliberately creating a hostile environment for law-abiding community members. I sat in grandmother's kitchen reading this legal terrorism, surrounded by her mason jars and hand-stitched Bible verses, feeling my world collapse like a house of cards. These monsters were trying to bankrupt me for documenting their crimes, using the legal system like a baseball bat to beat down anyone who dared fight back. The professional destruction escalated beyond legal threats. Anonymous complaints carpet-bombed the state electrical board, unlicensed work allegations, fabricated code violations, safety hazards that existed only in Patricia's diseased imagination. Each complaint triggered mandatory investigations that could destroy my license and leave me unemployable. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering if tomorrow's job might be my last. The taste of financial ruin metallic and bitter as burnt copper wire on my tongue. But Patricia's cruelest psychological torture was still coming. She organized a neighborhood block party with surgical precision, invitations to every house except mine. The RSVP cards requested family-friendly neighbors committed to community standards only. Translation: the working-class electrician isn't welcome at his own community celebration. Saturday afternoon became my personal hell. I watched through grandmother's lace curtains as my neighbors gathered in the street, sharing barbecue and beer while I sat isolated like a convicted sex offender. The sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversations I'd never be part of again, while the smell of grilled burgers drifted through my screen door like torture designed by committee. Mrs. Naomi wouldn't even make eye contact when she walked past my house to join the festivities. That night, drowning in isolation and despair, I retreated to grandmother's bedroom to sort through her papers. Maybe I could find something, anything, that might help me survive Patricia's campaign to destroy my life. Grandma had been obsessively organized, keeping every document in manila folders that still smelled like her lavender soap and decades of love. Bills, receipts, warranties for appliances long since broken. The paper trail of a life lived with careful attention to detail. In a folder marked House Papers 1960, I found salvation. The original neighborhood development covenant signed when Grandma first bought this property for $8,400 cash. Legal language that looked ancient compared to modern HOA tyranny, but the implications hit me like grabbing a live wire with wet hands. Properties built before 1975 were explicitly exempted from decorative restrictions under a grandfather clause, designed to protect existing homeowners from future association overreach. Basic safety standards only, no aesthetic controls, no vehicle restrictions, no landscaping requirements. My house was built in 1962. 13 years before Patricia's HOA even existed. I read that covenant until my eyes burned, legal phrases swimming in my vision as the reality crystallized. Georgia property law recognizes original covenants over subsequent amendments unless property owners explicitly consent to new authority. Grandma never signed away her rights, which meant I'd inherited bulletproof legal protection. Patricia had no jurisdiction over my property. Every fine, every violation, every harassment campaign, all illegal from day one. This wasn't just a defense. This was a nuclear weapon that would vaporize Patricia's authority and expose years of illegal extortion across the entire neighborhood. But before I could process this victory, Patricia made her most desperate and catastrophically stupid mistake. I woke Saturday morning to the thunder of heavy machinery. Through my bedroom window, I watched 3 guys with excavators systematically digging a 6-foot trench around my entire property. No permits, no city approval, just cash-paid contractors creating a medieval moat to psychologically torture me into submission. The foreman avoided eye contact when I confronted him. Lady said emergency drainage, city approved yesterday. Pure bullshit. City offices don't issue weekend permits, and the smell of his lie was stronger than diesel exhaust choking my morning air. My security cameras captured everything in glorious 4K detail. Patricia arriving at dawn to personally direct the operation, pointing and gesturing like Napoleon commanding troops. Audio picked up her exact words. Dig it deep enough that he feels trapped like a rat. I want him climbing over dirt piles every time he leaves his house. Criminal confession recorded in high definition. But Patricia's paranoia drove her to one final fatal error. That afternoon, she filed an emergency restraining order claiming I'd threatened physical violence during our excavator confrontation. Complete fabrication designed to silence me before I could expose her crimes. She'd just added false police reports and perjury to her growing felony collection. Sitting in my dirt-surrounded house that evening, I realized Patricia Thornfield had just handed me everything needed to destroy her empire and send her to federal prison. Time to spring the trap publicly, brutally, and permanently. The grandfather clause discovery hit me like touching a live wire, but sitting in my dirt prison Sunday morning, I realized I'd only found the tip of the iceberg. While Patricia probably celebrated trapping me behind her medieval moat, I spread grandmother's documents across the kitchen table like crime scene evidence. The original 1960 covenant wasn't just legal protection, it was a time bomb that would detonate Patricia's entire empire. Reading deeper into the historical context made my hands shake with rage and anticipation. Willowbrook Estates was originally designed as affordable housing for working families, teachers, mechanics, factory workers, like my grandmother who cleaned rich people's houses to afford a piece of the American dream. The grandfather clause wasn't some legal accident. It was deliberately crafted to prevent exactly what Patricia had been doing, using wealth and fake authority to drive out working-class families. My grandmother had unknowingly armed me with a nuclear weapon. I called my attorney Monday morning, my voice cracking as I read him the exact covenant language. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up on me. "Jesus Christ, Marcus," he finally whispered, and I could hear papers rustling frantically in the background. "Do you understand what you've just handed me? That Patricia can't legally touch my property? That she's been running a criminal extortion ring for years? That we now have grounds for federal RICO charges? That this woman could die in prison?" The implications hit like ice water flooding my veins. Patricia hadn't just overstepped her authority. She'd been systematically robbing families under color of fake law, targeting people who couldn't afford to fight back. But the revelation got exponentially worse for Patricia. My attorney's emergency research revealed 17 other original properties in the neighborhood with identical grandfather protections. Families who'd been paying Patricia's illegal fines for years, bleeding money they couldn't afford to a woman who had zero legal authority over their homes. Mrs. Naomi alone had paid $3,400 in bogus violations. The Ramirez family had forked over $2,800, working families choosing between Patricia's extortion and putting food on the table while she used their stolen money to fund her lavish lifestyle. "We're talking organized racketeering," my attorney explained, his excitement crackling through the phone like electricity. 20 years federal prison minimum, complete financial destruction. This is career-ending for everyone who helped her. The power dynamic had exploded like an overloaded transformer. I wasn't some helpless victim anymore. I was a federal witness holding evidence that would obliterate an entire criminal network. But Patricia's vulnerability ran deeper than legal exposure. Her financial records subpoenaed that week revealed the psychological cancer driving her obsession. The 2008 crash had left her mortgaged to her eyeballs, living on credit and borrowed time. Every month was a knife-edge balance between maintaining her facade and sliding back into bankruptcy hell. My modest house represented her worst nightmare, proof that authentic working people belonged in her neighborhood. a daily reminder that her wealth was built on leveraged lies and stolen authority. She'd declared war on me because I embodied everything she feared about herself. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit opened formal investigation within 72 hours. Mail fraud, wire fraud, civil rights conspiracy, racketeering, charges that would strip her of everything she'd built on the backs of innocent families. Patricia's assets were frozen, her real estate license suspended, her husband's law firm under ethics investigation for enabling criminal conspiracy. The empire she'd spent 8 years building was crumbling faster than a house built on rotten foundation. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted public humiliation that would serve as a warning to every petty tyrant who thought they could terrorize working families with fake authority. Time to orchestrate the most brutal public downfall possible. Patricia Thornfield was about to learn what real power looked like when it came to destroy everything she'd stolen. The week after discovering my grandfather Claus felt like preparing for the electrical job from hell, except instead of rewiring a house, I was systematically dismantling a criminal empire one connection at a time. My kitchen table became War Room Central, buried under legal documents, security footage, screenshots, and a timeline that would make federal prosecutors weep tears of joy. My civil rights attorney, James Mitchell, had transformed from cautious legal counsel into a caffeinated avenger. 20 years fighting housing discrimination had never given him evidence this ironclad. We met nightly in his cramped office that reeked of old law books and burned coffee, building a case that would rewrite HOA abuse law nationwide. "Marcus," he said during one 2 a.m. strategy session, his eyes red as brake lights from reviewing evidence. "We're not just destroying Patricia anymore. We're creating precedent that'll protect thousands of families from future predators." The scope of Patricia's crimes kept expanding like cracks in overloaded electrical conduit. Our investigation revealed she'd been running identical extortion schemes in 2 other neighborhoods, systematically targeting working-class and immigrant families with fabricated violations and illegal fines. Her criminal network had stolen over $200,000 from vulnerable homeowners across 4 years. But legal victory wasn't enough. I wanted Patricia's destruction to be educational theater, a public execution that would inspire other victims and terrorize every wannabe HOA dictator in Georgia. I spent sleepless hours crafting evidence presentation that would devastate Patricia in terms ordinary people could understand. Video compilation showing her harassment escalation from parking complaints to medieval siege warfare, financial charts tracking embezzlement patterns with the precision of electrical schematics, timeline graphics connecting her personal luxury expenses to HOA fund theft. Everything designed for maximum visual impact when the moment came to obliterate her publicly. The community network I'd quietly assembled became my intelligence army. Mrs. Naomi finally found courage to reveal 3 years of extortion payments, admitting Patricia had threatened foreclosure over completely fabricated violations. The Ramirez family provided bank records showing $20,800 in blood money paid to avoid harassment campaigns. Tom Williams, the treasurer, agreed to wear FBI recording equipment in exchange for immunity, capturing Patricia's desperate attempts to hide her embezzlement. My most valuable ally emerged from pure coincidence. Sarah Naomi, Mrs. Naomi's daughter and investigative reporter for the regional newspaper, had been tracking HOA abuse stories across 3 counties. She'd received dozens of complaints about Patricia's tactics, but lacked concrete evidence for publication. "I've been waiting years for someone with the balls to fight back with actual documentation," she told me over coffee at Mel's Diner, her notebook already filling with details that would become front-page headlines. "Your case could expose systematic corruption affecting thousands of families." Sarah's investigation uncovered Patricia's political protection racket, city councilmen ignoring complaints in exchange for campaign contributions, code enforcement officials fast-tracking Patricia's frivolous violations while burying legitimate appeals. The corruption web stretched deeper than Georgia red clay. Meanwhile, federal investigation was accelerating like a short-circuit explosion. FBI financial crimes agents executed search warrants on Patricia's home and office, hauling away computers and financial records that filled evidence gaps like puzzle pieces. IRS Criminal Division began building tax evasion charges related to her embezzlement. Civil Rights Division prosecutors were practically salivating over the discrimination evidence quality. I coordinated timing with the precision of a master electrician planning a commercial installation. Federal complaints filed simultaneously for maximum system overload, media coverage breaking exactly when Patricia felt most secure, community confrontations staged with cameras rolling and federal agents positioned for immediate arrests. The psychological warfare was equally crucial. I let Patricia believe her trench intimidation had broken my spirit, maintaining the illusion of defeat while building my nuclear arsenal. I avoided public appearances, stayed invisible on social media, even started parking my truck in the garage to suggest I was hiding in shame. Patricia's arrogance made her catastrophically sloppy. She bragged openly about finally solving the Collins problem at neighborhood coffee clatches. She used HOA meetings to celebrate record violation revenue and improved community standards. Her hubris was building toward the kind of spectacular fall that would echo across every HOA board in America. Technical preparations were surgical. I upgraded security systems with military-grade equipment capable of live streaming directly to cloud servers, ensuring no evidence could be destroyed or suppressed. Backup recording devices were strategically positioned throughout my property like electronic landmines. Digital evidence lived in multiple secure locations, including my attorney's encrypted servers and FBI evidence vaults. The smell of impending justice was intoxicating, like the clean ozone scent after lightning strikes, electric with possibility and destruction. 3 weeks before the planned confrontation, every element aligned with cosmic perfection. Federal indictments were sealed and loaded like bullets in a legal chamber. Media outlets had prepared coordinated coverage packages. Community allies were briefed on testimony roles. Even the weather forecast looked ideal for outdoor camera work. Patricia Thornfield had spent years terrorizing innocent families with fake authority, stolen money, and systematic harassment designed to ethnically cleanse working people from their homes. Tomorrow morning, she was going to meet real authority armed with federal badges, criminal charges, and the unforgiving spotlight of public humiliation. Patricia's desperation exploded into full psychotic warfare as federal investigators circled her crumbling empire like vultures sensing death. She must have felt the noose tightening, because her retaliation escalated beyond harassment into sabotage that could have murdered someone. I discovered the carnage Tuesday morning, my electrical meter obliterated like it had been hit by a sledgehammer wielded by someone with serious rage issues. The metal housing was crushed into scrap, live wires exposed and sparking, the whole system deader than Patricia's conscience. In the middle of a heat wave that was cooking Georgia at 98 degrees, with my elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson dependent on oxygen equipment that required constant electricity to keep her breathing. Standing in my driveway at 6 a.m., staring at three $200 worth of emergency repairs I couldn't afford, the metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth like I'd been chewing copper wire. Patricia had crossed the line from harassment to attempted manslaughter. But the electrical sabotage was just the opening salvo in a professional destruction campaign designed to end my career permanently. Anonymous complaints carpet-bombed every regulatory agency with jurisdiction over my business. Better Business Bureau, State Licensing Board, IRS Criminal Division. Each false report triggered mandatory investigations that consumed hours of documentation and legal responses, bleeding time and money from my already hemorrhaging bank account. The stress was literally eating me alive. I'd lost 15 pounds from anxiety-induced insomnia, my hands shaking every morning like I had Parkinson's as I reached for whatever fresh legal hell had arrived in my mailbox. The smell of my own fear sweat had become a constant companion, mixing with the diesel exhaust from Patricia's surveillance vehicles in a toxic cocktail that made my stomach churn. Patricia's husband's law firm escalated the legal terrorism with 7 consecutive cease and desist letters, claiming my evidence gathering constituted criminal stalking under Georgia Penal Code. Pure projection designed to drain my legal defense fund before the real battle began, each letter carrying threats of felony prosecution and financial ruin. But the psychological torture reached surgical precision with Patricia's Neighborhood Safety Patrol, organized surveillance that treated me like a registered sex offender in my own community. They photographed every visitor, recorded license plates of anyone who dared support me, and maintained detailed logs of my daily movements like I was plotting terrorist attacks instead of trying to survive economic warfare. The humiliation burned hotter than touching a live wire. Neighbors who'd known me for years now watched me with suspicious eyes, wondering what terrible crimes I'd committed to deserve such community-wide monitoring. Then I captured Patricia's most damning evidence yet, security footage of her delivering a thick envelope to City Code Enforcement Supervisor Mike Stevens, $5,000 in cash that coincided with a sudden explosion of emergency safety violations appearing on my property like mushrooms after rain. The bribery was so blatant it made my jaw hit the floor. Patricia was literally purchasing government officials to weaponize public authority against a private citizen, corrupting taxpayer-funded positions to execute her personal vendetta. But her witness intimidation campaign revealed the true scope of her criminal empire. Every neighbor brave enough to support me faced immediate financial retaliation. Mrs. Naomi got slammed with $800 in retroactive landscaping violations that had been ignored for 3 years. The Ramirez family received $200 in paint and fence citations for conditions that existed when they bought their house. My audio surveillance captured Patricia's midnight enforcement tours, her voice carrying clearly as she documented previously ignored violations with measuring tape and vindictive precision. Anyone stupid enough to help that man will learn what crossing me costs their bank account. A criminal conspiracy and witness intimidation, all recorded in courtroom-quality audio. The mini twist that destroyed Patricia's last shred of credibility came through her own desperate arrogance. She filed a false police report claiming I'd threatened violent assault during a chance encounter at Home Depot, complete with fabricated witness statements and Academy Award-worthy tears about feeling terrorized in her own community. What Patricia's paranoia missed was Home Depot's comprehensive security camera system. The footage was devastating. Clear video of her stalking me through the electrical aisle, deliberately creating confrontation, then immediately speed dialing 911 with completely fabricated claims about being threatened. Detective Rodriguez reviewed the evidence with the expression of someone who'd just watched a toddler lie about stealing cookies while chocolate covered their face. "Ma'am, this footage shows you pursuing Mr. Collins, not the opposite. Filing false police reports is a Class D felony." Patricia's response was pure, unhinged desperation. "That man is destroying everything I've built. Someone has to stop him before he ruins the entire neighborhood." But her confession was recorded, adding perjury and filing false reports to her expanding felony collection. The FBI task force now possessed enough evidence to prosecute organized crime conspiracy that would send Patricia to federal prison for decades. Wire fraud, mail fraud, bribery, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, a criminal enterprise that had terrorized innocent families for years. Patricia Thornfield was about to discover that destroying working people's lives carries consequences that would obliterate everything she'd stolen. Patricia's final descent into criminal madness began with a digital assassination campaign that felt like being mauled by a pack of cyber wolves. Anonymous social media accounts materialized overnight, spreading poison about my history of violence against women and dangerous mental instability that made me sound like a serial killer loose in suburbia. The fake Facebook profiles were professionally crafted with stolen photos and fabricated backstories, posting detailed lies about me threatening elderly neighbors and operating illegal electrical work that endangered public safety. Each post generated dozens of shares and comments from people who'd never met me but were convinced I was a menace to society. But Patricia's employment sabotage hit like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus. She contacted my supervisor at Henderson Electric with such convincing lies about federal fraud investigations that I got suspended pending company review. 20 years of spotless reputation destroyed by a single phone call filled with fabricated evidence and crocodile tear concern for employee safety. Sitting in my supervisor's office, watching my career crumble while the smell of sawdust and honest work mocked me from the shop floor, I felt something die inside my chest. This wasn't just about property disputes anymore. Patricia was systematically erasing my ability to survive as a human being. The neighborhood siege escalated into full-scale psychological warfare designed to drive me to suicide or murder. Patricia's safety patrols treated me like a registered sex offender, photographing every visitor and maintaining detailed surveillance logs that made leaving my house feel like escaping prison. The constant watching eyes made my skin crawl like I was covered in fire ants. But the social isolation campaign was surgical in its cruelty. Patricia created Willowbrook Safety Concerns, a private Facebook group dedicated to spreading lies about my threatening behavior and property value destruction. Screenshots revealed neighbors I'd considered friends sharing posts about feeling unsafe due to my presence in their community. Mrs. Naomi, whose electrical problems I'd fixed for free dozens of times, posted about feeling intimidated by his constant surveillance and documentation activities. The Johnsons, whose Christmas lights I'd repaired every year for a decade, shared genuine-sounding concerns about my increasingly erratic and unstable behavior. The betrayal tasted like drinking battery acid, burning, toxic, and impossible to swallow without permanent damage. Then Patricia made her most legally catastrophic mistake yet, driven by desperation that had completely severed her connection to reality. She filed a fraudulent mechanics lien against my property, claiming $8,000 in unpaid emergency HOA assessments for landscaping damage and enhanced security expenses. The paperwork was professionally forged with fake invoices, counterfeit contractor signatures, and backdated authorization documents designed to cloud my property title and prevent any sale or refinancing. But greed made Patricia sloppy. She dated work orders before the alleged damage occurred, and the contractor signatures didn't match state licensing database records. My attorney nearly danced when he discovered the fraud. "Marcus, she just committed felony document forgery that's worth 5 additional years in federal prison. This woman has completely lost her mind." Patricia's final act of desperation revealed the full scope of her psychological breakdown. She petitioned City Council to declare my property a public health hazard requiring immediate condemnation and forced demolition, supported by fabricated inspection reports claiming rodent infestations, toxic mold, and structural collapse risks. The fiction was elaborate enough to fool casual review, but my security cameras captured the truth in devastating detail. Patricia had spent 3 nights planting evidence, dumping garbage, spreading dead rats, and creating fake water damage to support her condemnation petition. Audio recordings caught her instructing accomplices with the precision of a crime boss. "Scatter the rat carcasses near the foundation. Pour this motor oil under the back porch to simulate septic problems. We need photographic evidence that forces the city to condemn this shithole." Criminal evidence tampering and filing false government documents, all captured in courtroom-quality video that would make federal prosecutors climax with excitement. But the fifth and final mini-twist that guaranteed Patricia's destruction came through pure poetic justice. At Morrison's Coffee House, celebrating what she believed was imminent victory with her shrinking circle of supporters, Patricia got drunk on overconfidence and started running her mouth loud enough for half the establishment to hear. "The Collins situation will resolve itself within 30 days, she announced with the swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "I've got City Hall connections that will condemn his property and force a fire sale. Some people need to learn their place in quality communities like ours." What Patricia's arrogance missed was Sarah Naomi sitting 2 tables away, recording every word on professional equipment that captured discriminatory intent with crystal clarity. "People like Collins bring down property values just by existing," Patricia continued, her voice carrying clearly across the coffee shop. "Working-class trash doesn't belong in neighborhoods built for successful families." Federal hate crime enhancement evidence recorded in high-definition audio that would add mandatory minimum sentencing to her already devastating criminal charges. Patricia Thornfield had just confessed to organized criminal conspiracy motivated by pure class discrimination, sealing her fate for federal prison time that would last until she died behind bars. Thursday evening's HOA meeting drew a crowd that packed the Willowbrook Community Center beyond fire code limits. Word had spread through neighborhood gossip networks that something big was brewing, though nobody understood they were about to witness the public execution of a criminal empire that had terrorized families for years. Patricia arrived like a queen approaching her coronation, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent and carrying a thick presentation folder with the confidence of someone who believed she'd finally conquered her greatest enemy. Her BMW pulled into the reserved HOA president parking spot while 3 news vans positioned themselves discreetly across the street, cameras ready to capture what would become regional television gold. The community center reeked of nervous energy mixed with cheap coffee and that institutional disinfectant smell that reminded me of every government building I'd ever been forced to visit. Folding chairs were packed so tight people stood along the walls, creating a pressure cooker atmosphere that felt ready to explode. I entered quietly through the back door with my attorney, carrying a single evidence box that contained enough documentation to destroy Patricia's life. My hands weren't shaking anymore. After weeks of terror and sleepless nights, I felt the cold calm of someone who'd already won, but was waiting for the enemy to figure it out. Patricia opened with her usual theatrical flair, presenting her annual community improvement report like she was accepting a Nobel Prize for neighborhood excellence. She celebrated record enforcement revenues, increased property values, and successful resolution of problem properties that threatened community standards. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with smugness that made my skin crawl, "I'm proud to report that Willowbrook Estates has achieved the highest property values in our region, thanks to consistent enforcement of quality standards that protect every family's investment." The scattered applause from her remaining supporters felt hollow in the packed room, like clapping for a dictator while secretly hoping for revolution. That's when I stood up. "Mrs. Thornfield, I'd like to address some significant inaccuracies in your report." The room went dead silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of collective breath being held. Patricia's face shifted from confidence to barely controlled panic as she realized her victim had walked voluntarily into what she'd assumed was her victory celebration. "Mr. Collins, this meeting follows proper parliamentary procedure." "Actually," my attorney interrupted, connecting his laptop to the projector with movements that felt choreographed for maximum dramatic impact, "we have legal authority to present evidence of criminal violations that directly relate to HOA governance." The next 20 minutes were absolutely beautiful. High-definition security footage filled the projection screen, showing Patricia personally directing the excavation crew to dig my property siege trench. Audio played her exact words with crystal clarity. "Make it deep enough that he feels trapped like a rat. I want him climbing over dirt every time he leaves his house." Criminal conspiracy and harassment, recorded in courtroom quality. Financial charts revealed her embezzlement pattern. $127,000 stolen from HOA accounts over 4 years, with detailed bank records showing personal expenses charged to community funds. Landscaping bills, legal fees, even the harassment security patrols paid with money stolen from neighbors sitting in that very room. The audience was murmuring like an angry beehive as the scope of betrayal became clear. But the smoking gun evidence was Patricia's recorded confession from Morrison's Coffee House, her voice carrying clearly through the community center speakers. "People like Collins bring down property values just by existing. Working-class trash doesn't belong in neighborhoods built for successful families." The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been terrorized for years finally understood they'd been victims of organized criminal conspiracy motivated by pure class hatred. "Furthermore," my attorney continued over the chaos, "Mr. Collins's property is protected by grandfather clause provisions that make every citation issued by Mrs. Thornfield completely illegal under Georgia property law." That's when the federal agents made their entrance. 3 FBI financial crimes investigators walked through the front door with the casual confidence of people who'd been waiting outside for this exact moment. Behind them came IRS Criminal Division agents carrying sealed indictments and asset seizure warrants. "Patricia Thornfield," Special Agent Rodriguez announced in a voice that cut through the community center noise like a chainsaw, "you're under arrest for federal civil rights violations, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy under color of authority." The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the stunned silence like gunshots. Patricia's composure finally shattered completely. "This is ridiculous. I've dedicated my life to protecting this community. These people don't understand what it takes to maintain quality neighborhoods." But her protests fell on deaf ears as federal agents read Miranda rights while news cameras captured everything through the community center windows. I stood up as Patricia was led away in handcuffs, making eye contact for what I knew would be the last time. "Patricia," I said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "you gambled that a broke electrician couldn't fight back against your criminal empire. You were wrong." The standing ovation that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The immediate aftermath of Patricia's arrest felt like emerging from a nightmare into sunlight after months trapped in darkness. Within hours, news footage of her perp walk had gone viral across social media, transforming our quiet Georgia neighborhood into a symbol of grassroots justice that inspired copycat investigations nationwide. The criminal consequences were swift and devastating. Patricia received 18 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and $150,000 in restitution to her victims. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. Her husband's law firm faced ethics sanctions that forced him into early retirement, and their family declared bankruptcy within 6 months as legal fees and asset forfeitures consumed their stolen wealth. But the civil settlement changed my life completely. The HOA was forced to pay $185,000 in damages plus $67,000 in attorney fees, funded through emergency assessments on the properties Patricia had protected from enforcement. Justice served with mathematical precision. The families who'd benefited from her selective enforcement finally paid for the privilege. My property transformation became neighborhood legend. The trench site was converted into a beautiful community garden where families now gather for weekend barbecues and children learn to grow vegetables. Property values increased 23% after Patricia's removal, proving that authentic community cooperation beats authoritarian control every single time. Marcus Electrical expanded to 12 employees as my reputation for integrity spread across 3 counties. Clients sought me out specifically because they'd heard about someone who fought corruption and won, turning my legal victory into the kind of business success that money can't buy, but character always earns. The neighborhood itself underwent revolutionary change under new HOA leadership that prioritized transparency and fairness over arbitrary enforcement. Financial oversight procedures prevent future embezzlement. Violation appeals include independent review, and enforcement policies apply equally regardless of homeowner income or background. But the most meaningful transformation was personal. 6 months after Patricia's conviction, Sarah, Naomi, and I started dating, bonding over our shared commitment to exposing corruption and protecting vulnerable families. A year later, she moved into grandmother's house, bringing warmth and laughter back to rooms that had echoed with too much loneliness. Our wedding reception was held in the community garden that replaced Patricia's siege trench, with neighbors who'd supported me during the darkest months, celebrating love growing from ground that once symbolized hatred and division. The social good initiative that grew from this experience became my proudest legacy. The Marcus Electrical Scholarship Fund, established with $50,000 from my settlement, provides full trade school tuition for disadvantaged youth pursuing electrical careers. Annual fundraising dinners in the neighborhood raise an additional $25,000 yearly, creating sustainable educational opportunities for kids who need second chances. Over 5 years, 47 scholarship recipients have graduated with 89% job placement rates, many starting their own businesses and continuing the cycle of community investment. These young electricians understand that technical skills combined with personal integrity can change entire communities, one honest job at a time. The legal precedent created nationwide impact that exceeded my wildest dreams. The Willowbrook decision was cited in congressional hearings on HOA reform, inspiring Georgia's HOA Accountability Act that strengthened homeowner protections statewide. Federal prosecutors now use our case as a template for investigating similar corruption, protecting thousands of families from future Patricia Thornfields. Patricia's fate serves as permanent warning to wannabe HOA tyrants everywhere. She served 14 months in federal minimum security prison, lost her home to legal fees and restitution, and moved to a different state where she works retail for minimum wage. Her attempts to rebuild credibility fail repeatedly as background checks reveal her federal conviction for civil rights violations and embezzlement. Meanwhile, our neighborhood has become a model for HOA governance that balances community standards with individual rights. Delegation visits arrive monthly from other associations, seeking guidance on preventing abuse while maintaining property values through cooperation instead of coercion. The annual Justice Day celebration, held every Thursday evening in the community garden, raises funds for legal aid organizations helping other HOA abuse victims. These gatherings remind us that ordinary people possess extraordinary power when they refuse to accept injustice and fight back with intelligence, persistence, and community support. 5 years later, sitting in my beautifully renovated home with Sarah planning our first child's nursery, I sometimes remember that terrifying morning when I woke up trapped behind Patricia's siege trench. The contrast between then and now feels miraculous, proof that courage and documentation can defeat even the most entrenched corruption. So here's my message for anyone trapped under HOA tyranny. Document everything ruthlessly, research your legal rights thoroughly, build community support strategically, and never let petty tyrants convince you that their authority is legitimate just because they claim it loudly. Drop your HOA horror story in the comments. You'll be shocked how many neighbors face similar bullying, but together we can fight back and win. If you love seeing corrupt bullies get exactly what they deserve, smash that subscribe button because we've got more David versus Goliath justice stories coming that'll restore your faith in fighting back against impossible odds. Remember, evil wins only when good people stay silent. Justice takes time, but it's always worth the fight.
That's all for today's HOA Madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.